Hello and welcome. We are here at SUV TV. I'm your host, Madre Allen. We're going to be talking about some HBCU sports today and kind of media rights. We had a bombshell article that hit us just recently. I've got a great panel for this discussion in today. First, I want to start with Coach. We have the former Coach of the Year in the SWAC over at Alcorn State, Coach Montez Robinson. Coach, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Got my brothers with us as well. SUV TV analyst and former HBCU and Power 5 football player, Justin Brantley. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to have this conversation with you guys.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we have sports reporter and host of the Victory Formation Sports Show, Jeff Lightsy. Jeff, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm pretty good. Thank you guys for having me.
Fellas, just want to go over a couple of things really quick. We had a bomb dropped on us a couple of days ago where we were hit with news based on a HBCU Game Day article. Shout out to HBCU Game Day. Posted an article that basically outlined a possible lawsuit based on a media deal that could impact other deals in place for the SWAC. There was a media company, Urban Edge Networks, that apparently signed a couple of media deals to run HBCU content specifically for FAMU and Grambling universities that hit the SWAC the wrong way, for lack of a better phrase, rattled some nerves over at the SWAC. The SWAC responded and said, no, you will not show SWAC football games or basketball games on HBCU League Pass. We have our own deal in place. You're not allowed to do that without us. And there was some explosion and some fireworks after that we'll get into a lot of the details of what happened as we go. Guys, I want to toss it out there and start to get a rundown of what happened. Jeff, I think you're a great person to kind of get us into some of the details and the timeline of how this all took place.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Mondre. What it looks like, just from my perspective, it looks like back in February, Urban Edge Network struck a deal with both FAMU and Grambling to broadcast, to have a channel on their platform called HBCU League Pass. So if you go to the app, I have the app downloaded, you'll see there's specific channels dedicated to FAMU, to Grambling. There's a couple other schools on there. I think there's a page for personality. There's a bunch of different stuff, and they're doing some really cool stuff. And in their press release, they talked about how they'll be broadcasting sporting events along with on-campus events, commencements, all kinds of different like cool stuff that they'll be doing. And like I said, that was announced in February. Well, like a month or a couple weeks later, the SWAC announced their partnership with HBCU Go, which is a different streaming platform with Byron Allen's media company, and they'll be doing essentially the same thing, but broadcasting for all 12 schools. Well, if you hear that, there's conflict because 2 of those schools have already signed a similar deal with a different platform. So there was kind of the beginning of the conflict, but nothing was addressed. And then obviously this week is when the HBCU Game Day, that article that you referenced to, came out that said Urban Edge Network is contemplating or about to file a suit against the SWAC. The SWAC is going to countersue over broadcasting rights. Well, remember, they have those channels for FAMU and Grambling because they expect to play football games. Because that's the thing. Like, people watch in masses. They watch commencements and they watch step shows and they watch different, bands and different. But to get advertisers, you got to have football. Football is what brings the advertisers. Football is what's going to get you 100, 200, 300,000 consecutive, concurrent viewers on your platform. And so that's what it sounds like from the article that you referenced to, is that Urban Edge Network went out to different advertisers and were, just is what it sounds like. Now, once again, this is not me having any sources or anything, but went to these different advertisers, Pepsi being one of them, saying, hey, we're going to be broadcasting FAMU and Grambling games. And it said Pepsi went back to the SWAC, according to that article, and said, hey, is this true? These guys over here at HBCU League Pass, Urban Edge Network are saying they're going to have some of your games. Well, we're in current contract negotiations about, 8-figure contract negotiations about with the SWAC to renew a contract. But maybe if they're going to broadcast some of your games, maybe we dwindle that number down. And that is where, everything starts to boil over. And that is where, different things are starting to happen. And that is where we come to the lawsuits, because the SWAC came out and said, no, they have no right to broadcast FAMU and Grambling football games. Now, they can broadcast their commencements, they can broadcast their other stuff, but the actual games, those rights belong to us. And that is where the conflict seems to be abrupt to who actually has the right to broadcast football games, because that's where the money's at in advertising.
Perfect breakdown, Jeff.
Appreciate it.
For sure. Say show as many commencement shows and step shows as you want, but
Exactly.
the football games, no way. So I want to get into now that we understand the timeline. I think the immediate question that comes to play is who had the right to do what exactly and when. And Justin, I think you got some really great thoughts on how that works and what actually is in the bylaws and what should be legal or not legal when it comes to that.
Correct. So I don't think the fault is in the place of Urban Edge. I don't think the fault is in the place of the SWAC. It can be a situation where both people can be right and both people can be wrong at the same time. Okay. So I do think that Urban Edge probably should be suing somebody, but it should not be the SWAC conference. If you think about it, that's like my 8-year-old son entering into an agreement to sell my house to the neighbor for a certain amount of money because he's like, oh, I want that money. I can use it. Like I live here too. I play video games. This is my room. I can sell my room. No, son, you can't. According to the bylaws, and specifically 5.4.2, it clearly states that the rights of the broadcast have to go through the conference. You cannot independently sell those rights. All contracts signed by member institutions for game telecast, whether live or delayed, shall be coordinated with the commissioner's office. The commissioner shall be authorized to negotiate television packages for the conference. That's in the bylaws. I don't care what you have to say beyond that. You cannot independently sell the rights to your game. Beyond that, there is an entire extra event / TV committee within the conference that is supposed to talk about, discuss, and break down these different opportunities that come to the table. So I think right now we have a lot of miscommunication, and all we can do is speculate on the back end of where that communication breakdown happened. But what it sounds like is Urban Edge probably wanted the entire conference, or they probably didn't because they realized there's certain teams within this conference. No disrespect, guys, please don't hop in my DMs trying to kill me. There's certain teams that nobody really cares about watching. So why am I going to give the SWAC X amount of dollars when there's a cash cow over here, right? Like, these are the guys I want. So I'm just going to go and approach them directly. So I don't disregard Urban Edge's business model and the way that they attacked it, but I don't think the children of the SWAC had the ability or had the rights to sell something that they don't own.
And like you said, Justin, I just want to touch on that. Like you said, it's not Urban Edge's, like, it's not on them to go make sure FAMU and Grambling, all their stuff is clear with the SWAC. Like, Urban Edge is a business company. They're not in the business of, babysitting schools. And I'm not saying that they have to do that, but I'm saying, like, if they approach you, say, just like if I strike a deal with you, Justin, like, if the deal doesn't benefit your family, it's not up to me to make sure the deal benefits your family. It's up to you to make sure it benefits your family. So the Grambling and FAMU, to me, are part of the SWAC family. And so if you're striking a deal with Urban Edge, it's up to them to go make sure, like, hey, this should be cleared with the conference. Is what it's kind of how I see it.
Jeff, I have a very hard time believing, and I think it's more willful ignorance. I have a hard time believing that Urban Edge didn't realize that those rights were not the schools to sell. I have a hard time believing that. Now, if the school decides to do that and decides, it's almost like receiving stolen property, right? Like you buy a car for $500 that costs $30,000. When the police come knock on your door, you can sit there and claim all day long, I didn't know that they didn't have the rights to sell me that. But common sense would tell you, you cannot enter into an agreement with a university for something that has to go through the conference. Now, were they privy to the bylaws? Maybe, maybe not. Should they have had access to the bylaws? Maybe, maybe not. Me as a business person, as an entrepreneur, when I'm investing or looking at any type of investment, I'm doing my due diligence. I'm doing my research. I'm going to cross my T's and dot my I's. I don't understand how you can take a look at that situation and say, I'm going to invest X amount of dollars without understanding the full scope of what can be done, can't be done. Those are all conversations that we're going to have on the front end so I can mitigate risk versus reward. Doesn't make sense for me to offer X amount of money if we're going to get to that point. And I've sold to advertisers, I've sold to sponsors, I've had all these back end conversations, and now we get to that point where, oh no, you can't do it. Okay, yeah, y'all might get some money in a lawsuit, but at the end of the day, it hurts your business in the long run more than financially what you're going to receive in the short run. So I find it hard to believe that nobody within that entire organization had the presence of mind to say, we need to go through the conference before we put out a press release. We need to have this conversation at a higher level. And if they didn't have the presence of mind to do that, they should understand that I have a consulting company and I will very, very graciously and willingly bring my resources and my expertise onto Urban Edge Network to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again.
Well, and let's talk about that. We're going somewhere great, and we have Coach Robertson with us, who I think is going to be able to add to that excellently. But one thing that I want to talk about to our audience is Urban Edge Network. This isn't just like some fly-by-night company that swooped in and was trying to grab a deal, right? Urban Edge has entered other deals, right? We're talking about having branded cars with HBCUs on them for NASCAR. We're talking about a partnership with Major League Baseball to show HBCU games in a co-sponsored way, in a simulcast way through Major League Baseball. How could the same company that was able to accomplish those feats to take HBCU broadcasting forward, for lack of a better phrase, fumble the bag with this deal, right? Like there had to be due diligence done for a company that could accomplish those things, as we're showing the HBCU, the Grambling State car, NASCAR, that you're able to purchase replicas of, by the way. Please do. How could the company that accomplished so much and do that, right, not do great business on this deal?
Well, because, and I think, and I don't want to cut anybody off, because it didn't benefit them to do the due diligence, right? Like, in my opinion, that's not their fault, right? Like, that's just like, if I realize that, I'm playing 3-card monte and I got a sucker in front of me that's about to give away the farm, I'm not gonna stop, right? Like, all right, we gonna see how far we can take this. Urban Edge Network is phenomenal in their marketing and their approach. Have a great concept, great idea. Everything's moving excellently, and I believe that they're taking the SWAC, in my opinion, to places that historically we have not seen. And we have not, like, that's groundbreaking what they were doing with MLB and with NASCAR. At the same token, they had to understand, either they had to understand that conversation had to take place with the conference, or the conversation took place with the conference, and this is some back end. The conference realized, maybe there's something we should have done a little bit differently, and we're sorry we messed up. We got there's too many variables. I think we can speculate all day long. I just don't see. I don't understand how we can get to that place where two conferences, and again, I don't know. We're only speculating, but for FAMU's athletic director to step down, it would lead me to believe that something was done not 100% on the up and up. That's just my. I'm not quitting. Right? We're coming off the edge of a pandemic. Kids got to eat. Mortgage has to get paid. If I didn't do anything wrong, I'm gonna be right there sitting in my office every single day.
Especially when he's done as great of a job as he done. That's what makes it all weird, right? Like that's what makes me think, oh, somebody got their hand caught in the cookie jar and it wasn't supposed to be there. You know what I mean? Like the article HBCU Game Day with the lawsuits comes out on Monday. FAMU's AD, who has done remarkable job in less than 3 years, but has only been on the job less than 3 years, resigns on Wednesday. That just is a crazy coincidence if it just happens to be a coincidence. But another thing which you talked about, Justin, was the partnerships with MLB, the partnerships with NASCAR, and those are, like you said, those are revolutionary, those are great, those are amazing. Those don't pay the bills. Advertising during football games pay the bills. You see, like, I know HBCU football isn't the Super Bowl, right? But you see those numbers on the Super Bowl ads go up every year. The numbers on college football go up every year. The numbers on advertising during NFL games go up every year. And now we're getting to the point where the numbers at advertising and marketing dollars being spent during HBCU football is like uncharted territory. It's uncharted territory. And so I think people are like, yo, if we get in on this early, we can make a lot of money and we can establish grassroots to therefore be able to make a lot of money moving forward.
Important point. And I want to make sure that we get Coach in here because that brings us to the conversation of the people in charge of negotiating the deal with Urban Edge, and those are the ADs and school presidents.
One thing real quick, Madre, just to touch on Jeff's point. I don't want to get into too much back and forth. We got to get Coach Montez in here because he's going to have some amazing perspective. But one thing I want to refute, Jeff pointed out, football is the cash cow. I highly disagree. Ain't no money like NASCAR money. Ain't no money like MLB money. Right? Like culturally, from a cultural impact, yes, we look at football as the cash cow. If you've ever been to Talladega, if you've ever been to, whether it be Irish Hills in Michigan, there's 100, 120, 130,000 fans lined up for those races every weekend. Right? Like it's a whole different level. Them cars, you can put 30, 40 sponsors on it. You can't put 3 or 4 sponsors on a jersey. Right? Like long money is in NASCAR. Long money is in MLB. Guys in MLB are getting $200, $300, $400 million contracts. Like MLB money is completely different than NFL money. NASCAR money is completely different than NFL money. And when you look at it from a perspective of a financial standpoint, I think that that's what caused this, to be honest with you. I think that if we were just talking about football games, SWAC would not, they wouldn't care at all. We're talking about Pepsi's not bringing an 8-figure deal for SWAC football. I'm sorry. It's not happening. Pepsi's bringing an 8-figure deal for the landscape and the tentacles that Urban Edge Network had the ability to start to grow and start to build within NASCAR, MLB, all these other segmentations that extend beyond the typical HBCU audience, right? Like, they essentially took HBCU sports and crossed over. And Pepsi realized there's crossover appeal here and it's going across the line. It's not just one demographic. Now we have the ability to utilize and make quite a bit more money in this lane than we ever have or ever could in the past. And SWAC said, hold on now. Like, the big money's not going to go outside of us. Like, we got to figure this out. So I respectfully disagree. When you're talking NASCAR, that's a whole different level of money. You and I cannot go buy a NASCAR. We can't.
You're right about that.
I want to get in here as we talk about how it impacts coaches. Speaking on the resignation of the Florida A&M vice president and AD, Mr. Courtney Gosha, the head football coach, who is always a big position at almost every university. The head football coach is in charge. And this is what he had to say. Coach Simmons says that no one is more disappointed in the recent events within the university and athletic department than me. I've known Courtney for many years and was one of the first people, if not the first, he talked to here at the university when he expressed his interest in our AD position. I witnessed firsthand the transformation he made to this athletic department under his leadership, that he listed those, and goes on to say that how challenging losing an AD that got so many things done for the university in a short period of time, how devastating that could be to FAMU athletics. Coach Robinson, I just want you to kind of weigh in here on coaches' relationships with the athletic directors, and how could that impact you seeing an athletic director walking out of the door like Courtney Gosha, who was able to get so many things done, not just with Urban Edge Media, but partnerships with LeBron James, new floors or sporting material, new upgrades to your field house, different things that he was able to do. How does that impact you as a head coach when, and how much do you care, right? Do you rather have an AD that's getting things done versus an AD that's caught up in the bureaucracy and red tape?
No, your AD is your lifeline. Your AD is the backbone to his coaches. You want to have an AD that you can be transparent with, and you can speak boldly and speak honest with, and it's going to go above and beyond the chain of commands to have that coach's back. So as a head coach, when you lose that guy that's had your back, that's when you're able to go to him and ask for different things, and he goes to the president, to the board, and is able to do those things for you to represent your program the way you think it should be represented, and you lose that guy, that is huge to your program. The guy that has your back, that has your backbone. But I think, like we were talking about, you guys, Jeff and Justin, you guys touched on, I think where the ball got dropped within the whole thing was communication. And guys wanted to be first and foremost. And I from the perspective of being in those meetings with the ADs, the presidents, and the conference office and the commissioner, everything has to go through that conference office. Everything is ran through them. You got rules and you got guidelines as a coach and as an AD, up front, I cannot step outside of these boxes because I'm a member of this particular university. But when your egos step in and guys want to be the first to make this move and want to go independently, things happen. Things in this situation within these lawsuits, or it happens. People lose their job. People have to step down because they didn't follow the proper chain of command, did not go through the rules and the guidelines within the conference. And for Coach Simpson, in his case, he lost a guy that was his lifeline. He was his backbone, who was doing great things for that university.
Coach, I do have a question for media and broadcast rights. I do believe that it is pretty clear that those things should go through the conference. What about the rest of the things that AD Gosha was able to accomplish at FAMU? Would the apparel deal need to be run by anyone else or the conference? Would any of the other changes that he was able to make at FAMU so quickly, documentaries being filmed there, with those things, would he have to be notifying the conference of all of those things, or was this just something that stepped over the line because it's broadcasting rights?
Well, at one point when I was in the SWAC, we had a conference-wide deal where everybody was wearing the same apparel. That stopped in the last 2 years of my 5-year tenure at Alcorn, where each school was allowed to negotiate their own apparel deal. And I thought that was groundbreaking, giving each school to be able to represent themselves from that standpoint. In the media side, I think it's huge. Everybody needs this outlet. This during this time in the last 2 years with the Black Lives Matter movement and different things, and NBA guys stepping in and wanting to push forward for HBCUs to have the success that they haven't, and haven't been getting the media outlet respect that we deserve to get. I think this is huge. So with the media standpoint, I mean, I just think it was just a drop of a ball where guys didn't communicate well. Egos got involved, and that kind of messed up some different things that we have, but it's not going to stop. Like we all know, this media side of things and marketing and branding, it's major money. But I think if guys would have just came together and and realize that we can all make some money and everybody can benefit from this. It's not just having just one or two. It would have been a good situation, but guys went out on their own.
Justin, Jeff, toss it to you. Your thoughts.
That part, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I understand, sometimes when you feel like you're the cash cow, you feel like you're the one that's bringing the value and you're not seeing that value reciprocated. It's easy, or it makes sense to try and carve out your own path and your own deal. And the reason why it's important for the conference not to allow that to happen, I played at Howard University, right? I'll tell you, like, there was nothing better than that atmosphere and experience, that game day experience, right? I have to look at Hampton, who is our rival, now no longer part of the MEAC. I have to look at these reports of Howard potentially exiting the MEAC. If you allow an individual school to prioritize their interest and their value over the entire conference, you're going to create a system in which that school can create a path for themselves to leave the conference. And I'm not saying that that's wrong on the school's end, right? Like, people like to sit back and pretend like we're all altruistic and we want to see everybody do great, even if it's not great for us. No, in reality, we all look at things from a standpoint of, okay, how can we best benefit in this situation? At the same token, we want those around us to be successful as well, but self-preservation is vitally important. So my thought process here is, as an entire conference, there has to be a way that you, like Coach Robinson said, obviously you can do your own deals with apparel and things like that. But when it comes to broadcasting rights, that's something that, in my opinion, has to be conference wide. And the reason being, could you imagine if Alabama broke out of the SEC network and said, we're going to carve our own deal over here with ABC by ourselves? The rich get richer. And now
it's going to be a lot. That situation that you just brought up, it will be a lot of the lower tier teams losing out on it. And
absolutely.
To make your point, just say like with Hampton, they're out of the MEAC right now. But Hampton the money making games is when they do play the HBCU schools, because those are the natural rivals. Those are the games that the media wants to see between the HBCUs.
100%.
Tennessee State, when they play Jackson State in the game, Tennessee State, they'll have a sellout crowd in that bowl game, in that classic. They won't have another sellout crowd in their league
season
all the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So it benefits the media to have those games. It benefits the conference to be a part of these HBCU games and not outside of the game.
So let me ask this, fellas. Would it have benefited the conference more to find synergies and partner with a company like Urban Edge, who was able to do a MLB simulcast for HBCU schools, that was able to do a partnership with NASCAR, that has a part of their mission statement as to bring NIL opportunities to HBCU schools? What on us does the SWAC as a conference have not to stifle innovation and forward progress within the conference?
Well, to that point, Mondre, I think they're trying to do that with Byron Allen's company. Now, whether that's better than Urban Edge, I don't know. Apples to oranges, whatever you prefer. But I think that's what they're trying to do, and that's why they're so hell bent on keeping Grambling and FAMU from doing their own thing on Urban Edge and League Pass, because like Montez and Justin pointed out, that you can't have 10 teams over here and 2 teams over here. It's just not. It's not the way you do business. It doesn't work. It's going to, like you said, do some kind of it's not going to be equally balanced, because with these TV deals with major conferences, if we just use like the SEC or whoever, they all get equal revenue cut from those big contracts with ESPN, with CBS, with whoever. And even the Vanderbilts or the teams that are at the bottom as far as football goes still get a bunch of money, you know what I mean? Because they all are on the same playing field as far as the broadcasting rights. Now, what you do with your secondary rights and tertiary rights, and I don't want to get into the weeds of that type of stuff. Those go down the weeds, but that is where, you know, everybody gets an equal cut. And if you have Grambling and FAMU go over to Urban Edge and say Urban Edge is able to cut deals to give Grambling and FAMU, I'm gonna just throw out a number. Say they give them $10 million, whereas the SWAC in their deal with HBCU Go only gives them $2 million. It's like, yo, we need to be over there with them. And that kind of just it makes everything bad. It makes everything ugly. And that is the problem. And that's why I think Commissioner McClellan is trying to like nip this in the bud early. And that's why you know, the guys over at Urban Edge Network are like, yo, no, we've already signed these deals. These contracts have been signed. We should be able to do what we agreed to. So that's the disconnect.
I think it comes down to the now and the later. Grambling and FAM, they, like you said, you just brought up the money aspect of the possibly, you don't know exactly what the number is, but just say if it was 10 million, each one of them could possibly be getting 5 apiece, but the other network is giving the conference a 10 million as a whole, and that's going to the whole. They're looking at, I want my slice of this pie now. I want it now instead of waiting to see where this this marketing brand or Byron Allen's group, where it takes us in the future. And everybody is waiting on, you know, as from, we haven't had it for so long in HBCU. We haven't had this attention. We haven't had this money. We haven't been given it. We want it now. So I think it's everybody's thinking about now instead of the whole and where it could take us in the long run.
Absolutely. We got some great questions coming in from our audience here. We'll ask to put that back up. We have DeMarcus Robinson asking, do you think the SWAC would put sanctions on FAMU and Grambling depending on the outcome of the lawsuits?
Now, I'm not here for the jokes, but I instantly, when you read that, I thought of Dave Chappelle when he said, sanction me with what army, right? Like, let's talk about it, right? Like, I think the sanctions are already happening. I think FAMU's AD stepping down, that's a sanction.
That is.
Yeah,
right?
That's huge.
Facts.
Like, there's going to be repercussions, but you don't want to overplay your hand, right? Because you overplay your hand and sanction them. Now, what happens when those two, listen, I think back as a kid growing up, watching Coach Robinson's team play on national TV, right? Grambling, that was the game. Everybody looked forward to that, whether you knew anything about HBCU or not. That's historical. And now they've got that. They're going to try and replicate that from what was happening in the 80s and the 90s. And Hugh was there. And then at Jackson State, you have Dion building something there. You don't want to slow progress by causing people to feel a repercussion for something that they had nothing to do with, right? Like, there's no sanctions that you can provide that will accurately affect the people that really should be held accountable here, other than, hey, you know what, you got to go. That's all that's the only sanction that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's tough, and you touched on it earlier. You can't fight innovation. And I love what Urban Edge Network is trying to do, and their goal, their innovation is not only brilliant, but they're moving at a speed which, in my opinion, is a little bit faster than what the majority of HBCUs are used to moving at. And the reason why I say that, and again, I know I'm gonna get killed online. Somebody's gonna come in my DMs and JB, you tripping, but there's a couple HBCU basketball programs that still don't have a head coach. It's April 22nd. And guess what? A lot of times they stretch that until the new budget year.
Yeah.
No, not the season, the budget year.
Oof.
July 1.
Which is July 1. They're not hiring anybody till July 1, new budget year. And guess what? It's too late to go get players. It's too late to put together a staff. So now you're going to punish that coach for not performing when you handcuffed him from the jump. So my perspective is, you have FAMU, you have Grambling, you have some of these forward-thinking progressive people that are like, I'm not sitting around waiting for the new budget year. We got to get to it, and we got to get to it now. Like, no, this isn't a 6 month later conversation. So I think that there's so many layers to this. And if you understand the way that some of these HBCUs operate, it's no fault of their own. But from a coach's perspective, man, I'm not waiting until July 1 to figure out what my recruiting budget is, and the live periods are in April. We're not doing that.
Very, very important, Justin. I just want to toss this in here again. Not an exact report, but Major Madness put out a list of Division I schools with the lowest budgets, and this list was very interesting because there are several SWAC schools on this list. So when we talk about who's impacted the most, Justin, I think you're 100% right. It's the coaches and the kids that are impacted the most because these types of business deals aren't able to get done. When you talk about Alcorn State being on this list with being number 1 on this list with the lowest budget, Mississippi Valley, Jackson State, Pine Bluff, Grambling State, all on this list making the top 10 as far as schools with the lowest budget. There seems to be an immediate need to get an influx of cash into athletics. And this looked like an opportunity to do that. And now that cash is being held up. Coach, I want to come back to you from a coaching standpoint. If you're in that locker room, understanding what could be possibly at stake or what you could do with the extra few $100,000 coming to your program, what would be your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's huge. When I was at Alcorn, you said we were number 1. We had the worst budget out of 353 Division I programs. I think my scholarship budget at that time was $10,000. So, I mean, as a coach going into it, the restraints that you put in when you decide to coach at an HBCU, but it's up to you whether you're going to pigeonhole yourself. So you have to invest in your program as a coach. So I was putting money out of my own pocket into the program because I wanted to be successful. But with $100,000 coming in to say a particular school like Alcorn or where I'm at right now at Fort Valley State University, that is huge. That's major. That's major, and that puts you over the hump. That it doesn't put you equally with some of the other schools, but it puts you in a situation where you feel as a coach where you can go in and still compete and win some games. And, I don't. You didn't mention in that top 10 in that same report, it was only one PWI listed in that category. So if you go a little bit longer keep on going to the top 20, it was only 2 other PWIs within that top 20. So we got a long way to go as far as from HBCUs and the media, the branding, and the things that are going on right now. It only can help us, and I just hate that we're going through this situation with the lawsuit because it hinders us and keeps us from continuing to move up and strive forward. I think it has to be handled quickly, fast, and in a hurry.
One thing to speak,
just to toss this in before we go, total budget, by the way, according to this report, this is not my news, but according to this report, total budget for athletics at Alcorn, $530,000. They were first on this list. Grambling coming in at number 10, total budget $910,000. So still both schools under $1 million, but again, we can see the discrepancy in how that budget could be impactful for athletics. So go ahead, sorry.
No, I was saying that, and that's why I think the SWAC broke their story to HBCU game day, because we're talking about resources. And one thing that they put in that story was that this lawsuit could log jam $100 million. That sticks out like a sore thumb. You get what I'm saying? Like when we're talking about a lot of these schools being the bottom 10 as far as budgeting goes, as far as all D1 schools, to hold up $100 million is to point the finger at Grambling or at FAMU or at Urban Edge Network, saying like, yo, these are the bad guys. You guys talk about we aren't out here like getting the resources and stuff. Well, we have the resources, but now those resources, or we're getting some of those resources. Let me pause on that. But some of those resources are being in limbo. And I think that was their ploy, or Commissioner McClellan, those in the SWAC office, right or wrong, their ploy to try to kind of, save their own, tail, to be like, hey, you guys are saying we're dead last in these things. We're trying to get our resources. We're trying to upgrade our stuff. We're trying to get more into the modern day, the digital era. And these people are holding us up. And that, I thought that was key in hearing those numbers and stuff. kind of, tries to kind of backs them up, but whether they're in the right or not, that's up for debate.
Yeah, I think that everybody's brought some very valid points to this conversation, especially when we talk about the finances of sports, which is something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And that's why I take the approach that I take a lot of times, because I'm in the weeds and I would never call anybody out or call out a school or talk about it. But I've had situations where I'm at Adidas scouting and the wristband to get in is $400, and having an HBCU coach hit me up like, yeah, I'm leaving, I don't need it anyway, here, let me slide it off my wrist and slide it onto yours, right? Because the resources just don't exist. So we want guys to go into gunfights with knives, and that's what's essentially happening, right? Like, and obviously we're in a different landscape now with the transfer portal, and there's so many different things happening, but we're not fully and adequately arming these coaches to go to battle on a year-to-year basis to be able to create any type of long-term continuity or any type of long-term marketing or budgeting plan. There's no, okay, as a coach in a lot of these situations, you don't know what you're going to be able to do until it's too late to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's a bad situation. So deals like this with Urban Edge, and I think that, and again, I'm hoping that I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. But my opinion is, if due diligence is done, there's win-wins across the board for everybody. If there's a way to figure this out and work it out, I feel as though, and maybe due diligence was done and maybe things just weren't moving fast enough, and Urban Edge saw a window of opportunity that was going to close if they didn't move quickly, which I could very easily see that being the case. We're only speculating. We don't truly know what conversations were had and what happened, but I do know that as long as we have all of this resistance to get investment into the HBCU programs, we're always going to be sitting back and saying, well, man, why they always got to play a play-in game at 16? Man, why they always got to, play eight bye games before Christmas break, and now you sitting there, your kids are demoralized going home to their communities, sitting around their families like, man, y'all 1-7, like y'all 1-9, y'all terrible, we just saw you get smacked on ESPN by 60, not realizing that that's an integral and vital aspect of being able to operate throughout the year, is taking those bye games. But you've got kids with messed up mentalities because a lot of them have never lost on that level. They've never lost by 60 and been embarrassed and got texts from their friends and their homeboys and on social media getting drugged. The only way we can get away from that is to inject capital, inject investments. And when things like this occur, in my opinion, it causes a barrier of entry for other groups to say, you know what, I want to bring money to the table. Because, and that's where it was very eloquently said by a great philosopher by the name of Sean Carter, nobody wins when the family feuds. When things like this are happening on a very public stage, it doesn't make just the SWAC look bad. It doesn't make just the member institution look bad. It makes HBCUs as a whole look bad and puts it in a situation where people are like, that's why I don't invest. That's why I'm not bringing, landmark or intriguing deals to the table. Like, I ain't dealing with all that. I'm not trying to sue anybody for my bread. I'm not going. We're causing more obstacles and hurdles than we're clearing.
Absolutely, we're gonna get owner operator SUV TV and our first class producer on here as well, Marcus Burnett. Marcus. Jump in. You have a few thoughts and some questions for us too.
Well, fellas, great conversation so far. I guess when we look at questions, I think Coach Montez Robinson put it perfectly. He said there's the now aspect and then there's the later aspect. I think a lot of the outcome of the now is going to be shaped by the legal proceedings and things that none of us on this call were privy to. So that's going to take its course. But I think when you talk about the lane of later, there can be a precedent or a way of thinking that kind of comes out of this that I think can benefit HBCUs if we're able to harness it. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean, what are you all's thoughts on how broadcast structures, broadcast partnerships, linear versus over the top and digital, with what the precedents and the benchmarks have been up to this point, and how the landscape is changing, everything from consumption habits to where the most avid HBCU sports fan bases want to consume content, how they want to consume it. The entire broadcast industry is undergoing a lot of change. So a lot of the models that were in place, there's easy impetus to be able to reevaluate those. Is it as efficient as possible? Is it maximizing the enterprise value of the broadcast inventory that the conference and member schools can sell? So, I know it's easier to pose a lot of questions than to provide a solution, but these are questions that I think really help us evaluate just how valuable what an Urban Edge or what other independent thinking groups can bring to the table when it comes to just creating a better broadcast platform for HBCUs, one that maximizes visibility and revenue. Do we feel like the situation is being handled in a way now that allows us to tap into what the value can be later? Scratch this current particular deal, just the lone Pepsi deal. Look at things like the Urban Edge Network and the presence on NASCAR. Justin, you talked about the household branding value that a NASCAR presents, a Major League Baseball and the Andre Dawson Classic simulcasting on the Urban Edge Network. Not to say that should be enough to, win the decision versus the SWAC, but just saying, should we ignore the innovation that these types of approaches can bring? And if so, can we do a better job of making sure we at least adjust the infrastructure to allow these types of innovations to take place in a much more seamless way moving forward without the family feuding?
Well,
yeah. When the Wright brothers first, go ahead, Coach.
When it comes to the broadcast and the media aspect in HBCU, it's really new. It's a baby. It's null and void. So I can see why companies want to come in. Like you said, it's a lot of different tentacles, a lot of different ways that this could go, and there's a lot of money to be made. I just think I'm just happy that we're having this conversation and we're speaking on where it could potentially go. And only way I see it, because it's at the bottom right now, it's going to go up. We can't go any lower than where we're at, but to go up. So just to be on broadcast, to get HBCUs to get this attention, to have different companies want to feud between who gets the rights between HBCU, it's something that hasn't been done. So I think we're in a great space either way.
I do, just my quick thought, and Justin and Jeff, will get to you guys. When we talk about a slippery slope, I think as a leader of any organization that you have to be careful to never stifle innovation. I think that is a very, very critical thing. You want to guide and provide guide rails for innovation, but you have to be careful about stifling innovation, especially in the media space where things are changing. I think when you start talking about streaming, and we're no longer talking about regional television deals or regional marketplace deals, streaming automatically makes it kind of a national broadcast deal. But do you have other things in place that cater to the way content is being consumed today, right? We talk about kids, most kids that are consuming all this content are not sitting down watching full games on TV anymore, right? So even if we step away from the live broadcast of a game, what about the rest of the content and how that's going to be consumed when we talk about the future of broadcast and media and asset consumption? I'll toss that over to Jeff and Justin.
Well, as far as like streaming it, I like you said, the way to go is more people are cutting the cord. Streaming is the way to go. It's what's happening. It's what, like you said, it allows you to be able to watch an Alcorn game in China. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you're able to stream it live, it might be 2 a.m. where you're at, right? But you're able to actually watch it from a device if you have internet access, et cetera, et cetera. So I think streaming is definitely the way to go. I like Coach Montez said, I hate that it comes to the lawsuits and battles and things like that, but I love that these institutions in their sports, their athletics, or whatever is something worth fighting over. It's something worth, because that shows that there is value there. I hate that it has to come to all of this, but there is value because, like Coach said, and I think I stated it earlier, this is all uncharted territory. You know what I mean? Like, these weren't conversations we were having, 4, 5, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. And now they're conversations that have to be had because there is money in watching a Grambling versus FAMU game, or a Grambling versus Jackson State, or a Mississippi. So there's value in those things because there's going to be eyeballs. There is guided interest. I can say, from someone who creates content about SWAC football, there is people that pay attention. There are people that care because they tell me all the time, right? They watch my videos, they comment, they leave messages, etc., etc. So there is, interest in what's taking place, and so much so that we're even having a panel right now about broadcasting rights over SWAC football, or broadcasting right, who's in the right, who's in the wrong, what do we know, what do we not know. Like, so therefore there's people watching right now, so there is a vested interest. How it gets handled, I think once it does get handled, because it'll all get settled. About the sanctions, I don't think there'll be any sanctions. I think FAMU and Grambling will, everybody will kiss and make up, but we will learn. This will be a big learning thing. Everybody will be able to learn from this, and now moving forward, broadcasting rights, advertising rights, marketing, all that kind of stuff will be a major topic of conversation at SWAC, in SWAC meetings with presidents, with chancellors, with coaches, etc., etc. And maybe those conversations haven't been had in the way that they should have in the past.
Hey, Madre, briefly, I think, one of our viewers, Jamie Walker, brought up a great point. Will it come down to the exact language and verbiage of the bylaws in terms of what constitute a broadcast, telecast, et cetera? Some of that verbiage and how you look at it, that's a very important caveat, because, I think when you look at it, if you are going to, like you said, stifle that innovation and say, hey, instead of both parties coming together and saying, how can we leverage all of the inventory? How can we find a creative way? Because even though the broadcast landscape is changing, look at how the NCAA tournament is covered. It's not just one channel doing it exclusively. You have some of the biggest media conglomerates out there finding a way to have it all kind of come together in a way that's in unison, doesn't undermine the broadcast product, and really allows everybody to be able to maximize the revenue. So, I know it's easy to play armchair decision maker. We don't all know the full context of all parties and what's involved. We wish them the best. But as we talk the road ahead, we have to figure out, is there a way to be able to have the awkward, creative conversations that we need to be able to have? Because the whole goal is, how do we put HBCU sports and their broadcast inventory and their enterprise value in a better position moving forward? So it's not easy work, but I think, from our thoughts to even some of our viewers' thoughts, it really kind of shows you how, if we can put our heads together, there's a creative opportunity to where there doesn't have to be a sacrifice of enterprise value to leverage all of these entities.
I do want to say this one thing, and I'll toss it over to Justin. This is not just happening within HBCU sports. Mm-hmm. The Pac-12 is having the same conversation between ESPN and Fox. If ESPN and Fox can figure out a partnership between those two huge companies, and they can figure out media rights and a partnership to benefit the Pac-12, then I'm certain that Byron Allen and his group with HBCU Go and HBCU League Pass Plus can figure out some sort of partnership that would benefit the entire SWAC. That would just be my thoughts. But Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the question that came up, and talking about the letter of the bylaws. By the letter of the bylaws, it's very cut and dry. All contracts signed by member institutions for game telecast, whether live or delayed, shall be coordinated with the commissioner's office. The great thing about this is the bylaws are year by year. So I think this conversation is going to change and adapt and adjust the way the bylaws are structured moving forward, and allow for some creative conversation and allow for that, entrepreneurial stance and the enterprise value to take place. Now, what needs to happen, and we take a look back at the bylaws, and that's 2.7, that extra events and TV committee, that can't have people that have no clue and no idea about streaming. And I'm not saying that they don't. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that committee needs to be structured full of some of these forward-thinking individuals that are able to position the conference in a place to take advantage of an ever-growing landscape. It can't be people that are just sitting there based off of, okay, this is a person that has tenure within the conference. This is somebody that's been around. This is somebody that, has a relationship with this school. No, it needs to be comprised of people that are experts within that field and allow them to do what they do best. We're not going to take the economics instructor and make them the English chair. That's not going to happen. So we need to identify a group of people that have the entire conference's best interests at heart, that have an understanding of this ever-changing landscape. And maybe the place that you go is, hey, we know where we're at. We know the obstacles that we're facing. Let's take a look within our alums. Let's take a look at some people that are in places. Maybe they don't have a vested stake within the athletic departments of these institutions, but some alumni of these universities that have, different roles and representation within the media space, or a very firm understanding of the media space, to bring in some experts in this field to say, okay, how do we get this done? And we make this impartial, so nobody's sitting there with a, me. It's all about my ego. It's all about, what I wanted for it. No, what's in the greater good of the conference? What's in the greater good of the universities? And ultimately, what's in the greater good of these student athletes that, it is what it is, right? NIL is not going anywhere. These student athletes are mindful of the fact that I have an opportunity to maximize on my value, my own personal brand value, whether that be $2, whether that be a free hot and ready, or whether that be $1 million, like is rumored that Oscar Shibwe is going to get at Kentucky. Whatever the case it may be, these players are understanding of that, and we have to create a system that fosters that and allows them to be able to take advantage of that, allows the school's creativity to be able to say, okay, you know what? Live broadcasts are going to be here. If you guys want to do some behind the scenes stuff, if you guys want to do some college game day stuff, if you guys want to do some hard knock stuff, if you guys want to do some stuff that goes through spring ball or goes through your fall practices, whatever, if you want to carve out those deals on your own, great. Because one of the things that I've noticed, a lot of times people want things to be one place, right? Like we want it all to go through one channel, one funnel. Where the value exceeds the most for the SWAC is having multiple placements of their branding. If every time you go to your phone and you're on different apps, you're on different channels, you're on different pages, and you're seeing different members of the SWAC, guess what? That only betters the position of the SWAC moving forward and allows the SWAC to better negotiate, and it gives them more leverage for a bigger overarching deal. But it requires everybody holistically to work together to say, hey, we're going to do our own thing, but it's not going to detract from what you're trying to do for the greater good of the whole. So I think that there's no one surefire answer to how this happens. I think communication is the key.
Absolutely. I can 100% agree, because like you said, there's opportunities out there. Like most of these schools aren't doing a lot of those things Justin just pointed out, as far as like I know Jackson State did the Coach Prime documentary for 2 seasons, right? He has his thing with Barstool, and that allows the cameras to come in and pretty much have free reign throughout the entirety of the season and produce 6 episodes after the season that get 1 million views on YouTube, another 1 million on Facebook per episode, right? So like those opportunities are there, and there is viewership that want to see that kind of stuff. There are people, now I get it, Jackson State's kind of an anomaly with their coach kind of being a kind of rock star kind of thing, right? A Pro Football Hall of Famer. But people want to know what's going on at Southern. They want to know what's going on at Grambling. They want to know what's going on just like they do at Jackson State, right? Like, so I think those opportunities are definitely there. But I think as far as where the conference is coming in, is the conference, like you said, they want all the games to kind of be streamlined in one spot. Whereas everything else, you're behind the scenes, your training and all that, like you said, your Hard Knocks type of docuseries and stuff like that. You guys can go out and produce those on your own, and that benefits the conference at large. But I think when it comes down to the conference itself, most of its money comes from the marketing and the advertising that is made during the actual simulcast of the game. And that is where I think these two behemoths are coming to a collision. And I guess we just have to wait and see what comes of that.
You want everything to be branded the same way. And that's probably, I can see where it could be the biggest problem between the two is, the SWAC wants their material to be put out a certain way, and the other company could see it going a different way. So I can see where there's a conflict right there.
Can I start a fight?
Go for it. I'm all for it.
My take on it is the price of the brick went up for Pepsi, and they didn't like it.
What do you mean? I'm curious what you mean by that.
The way the SWAC was doing it before, Pepsi, their advertising dollars, they got way more bang for their buck.
I agree.
Here comes Urban Edge Networks like, hold on. No, we talking 8 figures. This is the placement. This is what we're going to do. This is where it's at. I truly believe this wouldn't have got to this place if Pepsi didn't call the conference and say, hold up. We had a deal. We had this. I don't think it's we're looking at this from one perspective of an avenue of Urban Edge versus Byron Allen's group and the SWAC. No, this is big business, big money involved here. Pepsi realized I'm not going to be able to give the SWAC pennies for their branding and for their content anymore, because there's people that understand the value that are going to run the price up and run the cost up. And now what we used to get and what we had available to us is no longer going to be available to us. This gas prices went up. People are like, I'm staying at home.
Facts.
The price went up. Pepsi sitting there like, hold on. No. Like, isn't there price gouging? Isn't there some sort of system here? Who can I call? And I think that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a situation where Pepsi threw a bomb in the middle and got out the way.
Well, can I interject there, though? I want to ask you something. Well, when I read, correct me, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I read the article, the article I'm referencing, HBCU Game Days article, from what I understood, Pepsi and the SWAC were engaged in an 8-figure deal already. And then that's when somebody correct me if I read that wrong, please. I'm all for correction. And from what I understand, Urban Edge came to Pepsi like, yo, we're going to be broadcasting Grambling and FAMU games. And Pepsi was like, hold on, I'm about to give them 8 figures, but 2 of their biggest institutions are going to be over here. Now, why would I give you 8 figures if 2 of your biggest institutions' games are going to be played on a different kind of, on a different streaming service? And that's why they call it the SWAC office. Like, yo, we talking 8 figures, but maybe it shouldn't be 8 figures. Maybe it should be considerably lower, since I'm going to have to dish out some money over here where 2 of your biggest schools are going to be over in this different direction. Now, that's kind of how I saw it.
No. I'm with you wholeheartedly. I feel you, and I think you're right about the causation. But I think that what occurred with it is that 8-figure deal once the SWAC's on NASCAR and MLB.
Is it though? Is it? I don't know.
You're not. No. What I'm saying is you're not renegotiating that at 8 figures again. It's not the same conversation.
After they get involved,
it's not the same conversation. The value, the cost has gone up. So if Urban Edge is able to take this thing to a different place and to a different level, the barrier entry and conversations for investment are going to be completely different. That sponsorship dollar, that cost is going up. That's higher. That's a different conversation.
Well, yeah, and I get that. What I think, though, because like you said, the NASCAR and the MLB aspect, that isn't through the SWAC office. That was Urban Edge Network. That was those guys being innovative and doing some cool stuff that we had never seen before. And so that's why I'm thinking the SWAC had an 8-figure deal on their own from the article. Am I wrong there?
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. But what I'm saying is that deal doesn't benefit Urban Edge. I mean, yes, it benefits Urban Edge Networks, but Urban Edge is not on that car. Grambling is.
Yes.
So the value proposition is to the SWAC and the value of the SWAC. That deal raises the value of the SWAC. If that deal takes place, if that gets done, in order to come back to the SWAC and say, hey, we want representation here, we want sponsor, that cost is going up. It's a completely different conversation.
I think what Justin is saying, and if I'm interpreting this correctly, Justin is saying, based on what Urban Edge networks are doing, that the additional boost in branding and marketing that Urban Edge is bringing to the table is going to raise immediately the value of that deal and say, hey, there's no way you can continue to get this for the 8 figures that you plan to do this deal for, because look what we're about to do to the visibility of the schools in the SWAC that say, hey, maybe what Urban Edge was coming to Pepsi with was going to be was a lot higher than the deal that the SWAC was negotiating.
And that very well could I get okay. I completely understand that. And that's probably why Pepsi, that makes sense, because then Pepsi would go back to the SWAC like, yo, there's these guys over here, they're saying, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I see what you mean. I just don't know. Does somebody have to interject?
Well, I was going to say, guys, I think there's my bad, Madre. I think there's a unique opportunity for Pepsi here. I think overall, I would say since the George Floyd scenario up until now, I think Pepsi has been very transparent and measurable in some of the things that they've done in the diversity, equity, inclusion areas, but also kind of tackling some social injustice issues, head on. I think this is the type of scenario where, you don't want to put, expectations on them that are too lofty, but I think they have a unique opportunity here to work with the SWAC and potentially Urban Edge Network in a way that allows them to leverage the inventory of both groups, benefit Grambling and FAMU in a way that doesn't undermine the Urban Edge Network deal, but still do it in a way that edifies the SWAC, because at the end of the day, the conference-wide deal should still be in place, even though they have to finalize the numbers. And the SWAC as a whole benefits from Grambling and FAMU kind of being a proof of concept / case study at how the potential Urban Edge Network partnership can make a difference from them in terms of visibility, in terms of revenue, etc. So I think there's unique opportunity.
But won't that mess up the other deal that the SWAC has in place with the Allen Group?
That's what I see.
And that's a good point. But again, I see Urban Edge's examples of what they've done in the space. Obviously, the SWAC is, the incumbent. They're the conference. We know that HBCU Go is an outlier or a player in some way, shape, or form, but we don't really have the same, data, for lack of a better example, in terms of we see what Urban Edge is doing with Grambling and FAMU. It would be different if HBCU Go had those types of partnerships with those groups. Then we could look at the merit of it, the timing of it, etc. So I think HBCU Go is still in the mix, obviously, because they've been mentioned in different conversations. But I think it's less about Urban Edge versus HBCU Go and more about just evaluating alternatives that can move the needle in visibility and revenue, etc. Be it Urban Edge, be it HBCU Go, etc. I just think it's an opportunity for people to think creatively in a way that makes sure nobody fumbles the bag.
Well, I think the eyes and ears on the conversation now is going to create a different level of transparency and create a different level of conversation and communication that has to take place as to, okay, so why are we in this HBCU Go deal, right? Like, why is it? Because it's Byron Allen? Is it because it's the best for the conference? Is it because it's the best? And we have to evaluate all those things. Those are answers that, like you said, we've seen what Urban Edge is attempting to do. And I can't sit here and say that HBCU Go doesn't have the same plans or doesn't have the same goals or doesn't have the same potential reach. We don't know. And I think that that's why it's important to have the conversations. And I think that that's why it's in the bylaws that the conversation has to come in front of the commissioner and in front of the conference.
Absolutely.
So we can have those conversations to see what's what, and we can sort through it and make it make sense, and not just make it make sense for one, or not just make it make sense for the short term.
For everyone.
I think that there's so many places where there's a lot of room for collaboration, and there's a lot of room for figuring out what's the best fit in the best situation. And it's one of those things where maybe we have to look at it and say, okay, Urban Edge is ready to run right now, and we're in a position where we need to run. Maybe that's where we need to look at first. Or, and I don't know, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't have Urban Edge Network. Yeah. They don't send me a direct deposit on the 1st and the 15th, and neither does HBCU Go. I just think that the reality of the situation is there's clearly value with HBCU teams. There's clearly value in the streaming rights of these teams. There's clearly value in the media properties that these teams hold. Okay? Let's identify what that value is. Identify the right person to not only produce that content, but also continue to raise the value, right? Like, it's not just about the sprint, it's about the marathon. In whose hands are we going to be in the best situation to look back at this and that 8-figure deal that Pepsi's talking about now being a 10-figure deal in 10 years, right? Like, what can we do to continue to move the needle to get to close that gap of, hey, this team's budget's here, this team's budget's here, and how do we get here, right? I'm not saying which one of these partners will be a better partner for the SWAC. I'm saying that there has to be some level of forward thinking, but there also has to be a much better level of communication and transparency to make it make sense for everybody, so we don't end up in situations like this.
Hey, fellas, can I ask one question? And this is, they're not really a broadcasting platform per se, so this is apples to oranges. I include that caveat. Do you feel like Barstool face some of the same scrutiny and reservations that an Urban Edge is facing in this scenario, a Black-owned Urban Edge in this scenario, versus a group that, you know, kind of has had an administration and different things that we know are in direct conflict with HBCU ideals and some of the foundations? But do you think that the levels of scrutiny are on the same, are on par with what that group experienced versus what this group has experienced?
Marcus is trying to make me cancel myself. The reality is, if the Brantley Method hosted any of the content that Barstool hosts and tried to walk into any educational institution and do anything, they would tell me, no, sir.
Absolutely. You're 100%.
So, yeah. So to answer your question, no, there's no level of scrutiny, and a part of it is because of Deion's relationship with Barstool. Part of it is because of the dollar value that Barstool brings to the table, which I'm sure they're not giving any of that. And if they are, they're giving a very minuscule amount. I mean, you know, you look at, for example, Joe Rogan's deal on Spotify, and this man is, you know, xenophobic. We're not even going to go down that path, right? But the hundreds of millions of dollars that are given to people that clearly don't have the best interest at heart for what the SWAC is trying, or HBCUs in general are trying to showcase and are all about, right? If you go back to the funding and fundamental principles, if you go back to, you know, the landmark and what this is all about, if we just speak on those principles, Barstool shouldn't even be in the conversation. They shouldn't be able to get past the front door if we're just being honest about it.
I guess that's what I think is dangerous, though. That's what I think is dangerous, because I think when we get to, it's one thing if the bylaws back the SWAC's perspective, or if there's room for the UAN, that's neither here nor there. But I think when we start using, you know, certain words to, I think, vilify the urban edges and the different groups out there, that's a very slippery slope, because it's one thing to say, hey, there's some confusion here, this wasn't in accordance with the bylaws, and then letting the legal proceedings take place. It's a totally different thing to kind of equate some of these efforts with extortion, with different elements, when you have other groups that maybe aren't as authentic, or maybe don't have as much of a track record in doing noticeable things for HBCUs. And, you know, and we're not, you know, throwing words like extorting different things around there. So I think, I mean, we all have different perspectives. I think that melting pot is part of what makes it a productive conversation. But we got to be very careful to demonize or discredit groups that at the end of the day are all working with good intentions, even if there has to be a decision on a yay or nay when it comes to the legal proceedings of all of it.
Yeah, I think as far as the Barstool thing goes, no, trust me, Barstool is not the model that any type of black men can have, right? Like you can't have that model and expect to get $100 million or be able to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like that's just realistically, it's not it. What I will say though, as far as Barstool, the thing is, urban, like I think we've stated this a number of times. Urban Ed, we're not saying these are bad people. I think they intended on doing something great. I still think they will be able to accomplish something great in the long run. I think though, just when it comes to broadcasting games, that's the thing that Barstool did with Jackson State or didn't do with Jackson State that allowed them to do everything else except broadcast actual games. That's really what it comes down to. And Urban Edge looked to and thought they were be able to broadcast actual Grambling games, FAMU games, early SWAC games within those. And that's when the conference stepped in and was like, yo, no, y'all can do everything else besides broadcast SWAC games. And I think that is obviously that is the biggest conflict when it comes to, why these lawsuits are being filed in the long run.
Well, I just don't understand how a press release can go out stating that that's what they're going to do if that hasn't been. So I'm so baffled by the entire like the question we started with, like, how do we even get here, right? and it shouldn't take Pepsi saying, hey, what's going on here? Like when that press release came out back in February, somebody from the conference office, if that was the case, somebody from the conference office should have got on the phone like, hold up. This didn't go through us. We haven't had this conversation. Nah.
I want to ask a
different two schools too. It was for two institutions, not just one, but two of them.
Correct. I want to ask this question as we get ready to wrap up. We've talked about the state of schools in the SWAC in regards to their budget, in regards to their resources. I want to ask this question. Let's say, for instance, that Urban Edge Networks get shut out of this, right? And again, Justin, I'm very much like you. Urban Edge does not cut me a check. I have no affiliation. I've not done any broadcasts or anything with them at all, right? The question that I have is, if Urban Edge Networks, a institution that has already done some really great things for HBCUs and schools in the SWAC, if they get shut out of this, and on top of that, you also lose one of the best ADs or most productive, I'll say that. I'll say because best is relative, but most productive ADs in your conference. Can the SWAC afford to take those losses with what is at stake and what's attempting to be built? Will this cause us to continue to ask the question of, hey, why don't great athletes decide to go to HBCUs? Well, if you continue to undercut the resources, you make that decision tougher. Can the SWAC continue to afford to lose these type of partnership opportunities and these type of resources when we talk about AD Goshen?
The SWAC is in between a rock and a hard place. Right now, no matter what they do, there's going to be reverberations that we feel and we discuss and we talk about for years to come, right? Urban Edge Network, from all the research I've done, and this is just my independent thoughts and research, I truly love the landscape and direction that they're taking, okay? I feel as though if the SWAC allows them to take the lead, to some, it'll appear as though they were bullied into that, right? And it will set a precedent where other institutions or institutions within the SWAC will say, okay, well, we don't like what the conference is doing. We're going to go around and do our own thing. And if it works, we could just bully the conference into doing what we wanted to do anyways. So I think that sets a bad precedent if you go that way. If they squash it and say, hey, we're not dealing with Urban Edge Network, I think there's a bad precedence there because there's so much great things that are happening. And maybe you might really want to do business with Urban Edge Network in the future. But if you squash the deal now, are you going to be able to have that conversation coming again? So I think that it's no matter how you look at it, there's going to be somebody that's unhappy. There's going to be somebody that, and from that perspective, I think it's going to come down to what makes the most sense, what's best overarching, not just for the conference today, but what's best for the conference, 5-10 years from now. So I think none of us on this panel are really going to understand or know what's going through the thought process of that decision, because I'm just, again, I tend to, I'm one of those people that's forever skeptical with everything. I don't know how we're 2 months into this, and just now there's if I'm the commissioner of the SWAC and a press conference or a press release comes out saying that my games are going to be broadcast here and I'm working a deal here, that's taken care of here. We're not waiting until 2 months down the line to have that conversation.
Well,
I do want to address this comment, the comment that was just up. I do want to address this comment that the conference is bigger than one school. Kinda, but I want to look at the ACC. Look at what happened when Tom Jurich was forced to leave Louisville, and then you lose Rick Pitino, and now Coach K is retiring. I remember at one time heavily the ACC was looked at as a conference that ran basketball, and it was very vital and very important. If you think that losing a great AD at a school doesn't impact the conference, I'm sorry. I believe that is absolutely false and wrong. Your AD is going to hire your football coach and your basketball coach in alignment with whatever the president of the school is wanting to happen. Hiring a great coach is the first step into having a great program. If you have a great program, if you have enough of those, then you can have a great conference. You can't lose great resources at the AD level and think that your conference is going to flourish. That I just don't see how that happens.
I want to answer both of y'all questions. I agree with you, Dre, when you're saying losing a great guy within your program can hurt the conference. I agree. But also, when you're speaking up from the commissioner and Charles was a great AD in the SWAC with being at Texas Southern, and he was the one who started and innovated and pushed things over the hump to doing different things. That's why he became the commissioner, because he was voted on by the presidents and by the ADs to put him in that situation. And he was a guy that definitely brought transparency to the conference, because beforehand, as coaches within the league, we didn't know where things were going, where the money, how the money was different used. Charles came in and opened up those different avenues and gave opportunity to say, this is what we're going to do with the money from the next 2 years here. This is what we're going to do at this point. We're going to break it off. We're going to give it to the schools. So I definitely think that he was a guy when it broke out like 2 months ago. He probably knew it, but because he's a guy of principle, he wanted to handle it with the particular universities. Then it got bigger, so he had to step in and take it to the next level. Because, like you said, things going into it, I think the different parties knew everything had to go through the conference office, but he wanted to try to handle it with those before he took it to a bigger stage.
Mondre, you was hitting too close to home, man. I'm from Louisville. The Tom Jurich thing kind of hurt a little bit. But just to speak on your original question, I don't think Urban Edge goes anywhere, even if they lose this battle with the SWAC over the games, the conference games, because we also have to get specific on what is what. From what I understand, once again, this is all based on that HBCU Game Day article, is that Urban Edge can't broadcast conference games. Now, if Grambling plays Louisville, for example, it sounds like they can broadcast those games. That's just what the language sounds like from what I understand from the part that they put out from Commissioner McClellan. Was like, no conference game will be on a different party besides the ones we choose from, right? So that's what is you want to interject?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, but what non-conference games is the SWAC going to control the rights to? If they play Louisville, Louisville's controlling that. If they play... You see what I'm saying? Like, they will not have the rights to those non-conference games unless they start to do non-conference buy games like the high majors do. Like So that's where I think having things like that in the bylaws to say, okay, you can do what you want on your non-conference game, it doesn't even make any sense, right?
And I agree with you. I agree with you. But at the end of the day, I don't think Urban Edge is going anywhere because even if they win or lose, because we don't know what'll play out in court. You stated out what the bylaws say, so it kind of gives us a peek into what's going to happen in court. But at the end of the day, that's what courts are for. That's what litigation, all that stuff is for. What I will say though is that I don't think Urban Edge goes anywhere simply because I think Grambling, outside of football games, now granted football is the cash cow, but outside of football game, Grambling does still offer something. Like Grambling University still offers something as far as putting a product on your streaming service. Same with FAMU. Losing the AD at FAMU, that's tough. Like we're not gonna act like that's a small blow. That is tough and that is going to hurt. But I also think we have to, if Urban Edge loses, that sounds like the HBCU Go thing will get a green light, and I think that could be something that will be beneficial to the conference as well. Allen Media Group is something that has a bunch of different platforms, and in their press release with the partnership with HBCU Go, it was stated that there will be not only just on HBCU Go, but also on the Grio, also on some of his other platforms, and I think that will also open the doors for a lot of opportunities for people across the country and around the world to be able to get access to different HBCU schools outside of just Grambling, FAMU, Jackson State, the Alcorns of the world, the Mississippi Valleys of the world, the Pine Bluffs, et cetera, that I don't think that opportunity would have been there without a partnership like this.
No,
Gotcha.
I don't disagree. And I think that, the mention was just that Grambling at Jackson State. We just saw that comment scroll across the bottom as a non-conference game. That game's at Jackson State. We already know who's going to control the rights to that game, right? So, those are some things that we have to take a deeper look at this. And I think that, could this whole situation have given the blueprint to a HBCU Go to how to move forward, right? Like they were able to sit back and watch what Urban Edge did. And if they're the ones to get the green light, now that, okay, well, let me take a little bit out of this book, So I think it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting.
Guys, I want to toss it over. Coach, any closing thoughts from you?
Just really appreciate you guys having me on this panel. It was good to get my perspective. And hopefully some people got something from it and was able to give some insight.
For sure. Marcus Burnett, you're a streamer, you run a company, you're in this business. Any closing thoughts on how this could impact you as an entrepreneur, other companies that are in the space?
Well, I just think it's great dialogue. I think it's iron sharpening iron, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of hard work, efforts, and things that none of us can understand the depths of that SWAC office has to consider and execute and administer on a daily basis. So don't want to make light of that, and shout out to the folks at Urban Edge. I think at the end of the day, regardless of what the legal outcome is, everybody benefits from this type of think tank, different perspectives, and really figuring out how things can be better moving forward. So kudos to everybody involved, and much respect.
Absolutely. Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, man, I love, like I said, I hate that it had to come from the point of a lawsuit or anything, but I love that these conversations are being had. I love that the HBCUs are being highlighted in this way, that so much so that, different entities are fighting for the broadcasting rights, because that lets me know that there is value in those broadcasting rights. There is value. That means there is an invested interest from the public at large at what's going to take place on the football field. And like Justin pointed out, it's only going to increase visibility as far as the universities. It's only going to increase the visibility as far as the players, the NIL that's brought to these players. Therefore, the money that is brought into the schools and the individuals at the schools. So I love it all the way around. Wish the best on both parties, but I am just glad that this is something that is past due. This has been due for these young men and young ladies at these different universities, and I love that they're finally getting that appreciation that they deserved for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. We'll go to Justin.
My closing thoughts are, I truly enjoy being able to have conversations and dialogue like this. I think that there needs to be more conversation around the business side of sport, the business side of HBCU athletics. So I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the opportunity to be on this panel. I hope not too many people on the outside are walking away from this like, man, I got to go jump in his DMs and talk crazy to him, because all I want to see at the end of the day is I want to see the value of HBCU sports, the value of the Black athlete, the value of Black coaches. I want to see the value rise. And I think that if we keep that at the principle of the conversation and we lock in and say, okay, look, let's sort out the egos, let's sort out the companies, let's sort this out. We can figure that out in the back room. But the reality is we see that if it wasn't valuable, it wouldn't be discussed. It wouldn't be in the news the way it is. It wouldn't be, a lot of different it wouldn't be a lot of different conversations and things happening. So obviously we're in a place that we've never seen before, in a landscape that's never been this way. So I love to see the innovation. And I think that, you can't take away, I don't care what side of the fence you stand on, you can't take away the genius and the innovation that came from Urban Edge Networks to identify opportunities and take advantage of that lane. So hats off to them. Hats off to all the viewers. I mean, the fact that people are taking time out of their day to watch us discuss this lets us know, you know what, we're moving in the right direction. So that's all I got.
Absolutely. Progress doesn't always move at a lightning rod pace. So I definitely want to thank all of our amazing panelists that took part in this discussion. Learned a lot, but also want to thank the viewers. Like Justin mentioned, hey, we're midday here on a Friday afternoon, and people are locked in, not only watching this discussion, but participating in this discussion, passionately participating in this discussion. It shows how important sports and athletics are at HBCUs, but how much people are passionate about the growth and the forward progress at our HBCUs. I think at this point, we're going to be able to build on top of this passion in these discussions. And like Justin mentioned, an important point, these bylaws are year by year, right? We just had a disruptor come in and disrupt some things and maybe show us that there's some additional language or some new ways that we can look at this space and the tie between athletics and media and broadcasting. We know how powerful that can be. So I think we definitely can make some progress moving forward. So want to thank everybody. Want to thank our partner, SUV TV, as always, for being a platform here for these discussions. Thank all the fans and everybody that watched and participated in this for joining us in this discussion. So we'll be back soon as things develop. I'm sure we'll be back to check in once we see how this all plays out.